This is not an official podcast of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, NSDAR, and does not necessarily represent the position of the NSDAR. This interview is being conducted for the Daughter Dialogues Oral History Project. The interviewer is Risha Rainey. The narrator is Michelle Campbell Johnson. Michelle, when were you born?
I was born in the 1970s, early 1970s in Detroit, Michigan.
Tell me about your childhood.
Well, it was a very, very enjoyable childhood growing up in Michigan. Lived on the west side of Detroit. I was very active in my school. I studied tap, jazz, ballet, dancing. I was very active in the Girl Scouts of America. I was a track athlete, a gold medalist, in fact, in a couple of different relays, the 400 meter and the 800 meter.
Where did you win this gold medal?
Oh, I won several actually over a period of time. We used to run track at a local Lutheran high school. And in fact, the first time I actually ran, I got a bronze medal. And I have vowed, and my parents were there, I said, I will never get a bronze again. And from that point on, all I received was gold medals from that point on.
Were you active in any other activities during high school?
Yes, I was. I was the captain of my high school cheerleading team and also an officer of the National Honor Society.
You seemed very busy and active as a child.
I was. My parents made sure that I had exposure to a lot of different things, theater, dance, organizations, and of course, keeping up my academics at the same time.
Were both of your parents working?
They were. My father was a marketing executive, and it's kind of interesting. I never realized how our paths kind of are on this. I'm on the same path as my father, and my mother actually brought that up to my attention. He would bring his work home, and this was the days where they used to use flip charts and, really old school with different color markers and those things. And so he would ask me, come over here, Michelle, I'm doing a Pareto chart and I need to make these bars blue and I need to make this one red and this one yellow. And can you color these in for me? Of course, I didn't know what the numbers and the figures were, but just being involved at an early age, I just realized that, sometimes you bring the work home with you. And it kind of carried on to my own professional career. My mother, she's now a retired accounting assistant. She spent many years at the utilities company in the area where we lived. And I actually ended up having some summer internships during my college summers at that corporation.
Do you think that shaped your career now, going with your mother as well to the corporations?
I do think so. You just look at how your parents were and how they operated, and it's kind of like, well, I have to do at least that, if not more. So just having that exposure was an easy fit for me to make a decision to go to the next level, to do some things for myself. And, I even look at my own children and, they say, college is a must. This is what we it's kind of like a given. It's not even something debatable because that's all they know is that people go to college.
Speaking about college, tell me about your path to your career and what you do.
Once I graduated from high school, it was a small Catholic school in Detroit. I was accepted at Michigan State University and I received my bachelor's in electrical engineering. That was a very interesting experience, being one of the only African American women who graduated in electrical engineering the year that I graduated. So that was quite an accomplishment for me.
You have to tell me more about that. Why
Okay.
did you pick electrical engineering? Because as you said, there is a very small representation of African American women in that field. According to the National Science Foundation, back in 1995, roughly around the time that you would have been graduating, African American women only represented 1.58% of those earning engineering degrees. So tell me, how did you select engineering as your field?
Well, it was really interesting. I must admit, I did have some mentors and people in my family that helped me kind of take on that path. I had a cousin at the time who was attending Michigan State University who was studying mechanical engineering. And I also have a cousin who later on, his fiance, now wife, they both were studying chemical engineering at another university. So I had three people already before me that were in the engineering field. And to be honest with you, I said, well, okay, she's doing mechanical, he's doing chemical. Okay, I'll pick electrical. And my family was like, that's a good fit for you because you're already doing things like fixing vacuum cleaners and radios and taking stuff apart and looking at circuitry and then trying to, fix things around the house. So that sounds like a good fit for you. And admittedly, I did not know a lot about what electrical engineering entailed, but I'm so grateful and happy that I did select that because it was an awesome experience, learning so much about digital circuits, power electronics, controls and robotics, and so forth. And always having that inquisitive mind, even as a child, and being able to actually get my hands dirty, if you will, for lack of a better term, in laboratories with different professors and so forth. So it actually ended up being a very, very good experience for me.
How did you develop that curiosity as a child?
I want to say that my parents allowed me to learn. And I say that because, my father was a person who would clean the garage and work in the yard and do different things. And he would always invite me, hey, do you want to come out here and see, how I trim the hedges? And so I just was always doing things, and my mom, inside the home doing things and learning, various types of skills within the home, and both of them being professionals too. So having that exposure on their professional side and as well as what they brought into the home, I think it was just a natural. The schools I went to, the starting in from kindergarten to sixth grade in Lutheran school, and just being exposed to some of the things that they afforded us through our science projects, and it's just so interesting. What a wonderful experience at that school. And then transferring over to a Catholic school for 7th through 12th grade, and the things that they exposed me to, I think I had the best, I guess, opportunities to be able to really get my hands on different concepts and techniques and different things. So I kind of had that advantage.
What would you say about the statistic that I find a little alarming, that although there has been a lot of push to put women, especially minority women as well, into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, the numbers are declining according to the National Science Foundation statistics, the most recent data available from 2014. Now, African American women only represent 0.99. That's less than 1% of engineering bachelor degrees.
Yes, that's quite unfortunate. I can tell you personally that I've taken on initiatives throughout my career to expose inner city youth who are typically minorities to the STEM curriculums and the actual job scopes that we do. At one of my former employers, we had a day where I brought students in from Chicago who had really never, one, been out in the suburbs, and then two, never seen people that looked like me and them in a corporate environment, and being able to show them things like what we do in the innovation lab and what types of technologies that we brought forth that really revolutionized the world. And when we started the program, I asked the students, I said, so who wants to be an engineer? And nobody, they're kind of looking around. And then I said, well, do you know what an engineer is? And then they said, well, not really. I said, well, we're going to spend the day and I'm going to show you what we do. And then I brought other minority engineers that were working with me to kind of support me in this effort of having them come out and get exposed to what we do. And at the end of the program, I asked them again, I said, so who wants to be an engineer? And all the hands were raised. And I said, it's pretty exciting, isn't it? It is technical. It is difficult, but it is so rewarding. I can sit here and tell you there's technology that's out in the world today where I was a pioneer. I was on the front end when those things were developed.
Can you tell me about some of those?
Sure. So in my career working at the largest cellular communications company at that time, some of the first cellular devices, cell phones, were created under my watch. Also being on the network side or the infrastructure side of that business and being able to deploy new technology that became nationwide communications that we use today. And then moving forward from just cellular to broadband, which is what you hear LTE, 4G, LTE, and then 5G. I was right there when that all started. And being the first to, launch LTE products, I can say myself and my team, we were the first to deploy the first LTE, 4G LTE broadband system for public safety, and that was in Harris County, Texas. And so those are some of the things that I can look back and I can see where technology has shifted in different types of markets, from the consumer market to public safety to military and so forth. And just being that person, again, this little brown girl from Detroit, being able to be at the forefront of some of the biggest and best technologies in the world is just, I'm just grateful for that.
What role did you play in those deployments?
I was actually leading the team, so I was in a director and senior director role.
Tell me how you became a senior director coming from Michigan State University after you graduated. How did your path lead you to becoming a director?
When I graduated from Michigan State University, I accepted a position at the #1 company for engineers. And that was according to Engineering Magazine at the time. And it came with a lot of wonderful perks. It was a wonderful location, Chicago, and all of that. And so I started in a lab. We had a small lab where we actually sat, and I spent time working on quality of products that we were launching to customers and the issues that arise from those products. So I learned a lot about products just by the things that didn't work correctly that needed to be fixed. And I moved from that to new product technology. So more so not being on the back end of the solution, but on the front end and understanding the new developments of products that we needed to launch. And then I actually had a mentor. So they started a pilot program of a mentoring program where I was connected. Now, at this time, I'm just a lowly engineer, just kind of entry level, just coming in. And they paired me with a director of engineering. And he was an incredible mentor. He really was the one who showed me that, yes, you're technically sound and you're technically, able to do the job, but you are a people person and you need to be on the forefront where our customers are. And I said, I would love to do that. And he said, why don't you talk to this person in marketing? He's one of my buddies. He's a director, and just pick his brain on what they do. And so I did it. I met with him and he talked about all this front end work where you engage with the customer, you understand the customer's needs, what problems they're trying to solve, and then you would bring that information back and there's a team within the house that will create whatever they're trying to, establish. And so that was great. I loved just the interface, the travel. I've traveled the world meeting with governors and mayors.
Where are some of the places?
I've met the governor of Maryland. I've sat down with the chief of police for NYPD. Especially that was particularly interesting because I sat down with him on the 10-year anniversary of 9/11 and really learned a lot about the things that went wrong and how we, through communications, could improve that experience, getting that exposure of to a community that has been using two-way radio communications, the walkie-talkies, forever, and now you're trying to tell them, let's move to broadband. And they're like, okay, what am I going to do with that? And then you start telling them, oh, you can do situational awareness where you can do, diagrams on the, a touch screen, and you can tell them to take this route and they can see it all in real time. And you can look up the stats and the profiles of people that you're looking for instead of waiting for dispatch to basically verbally tell you information. It can all come up on the screen now. So just really bringing public safety into the 21st century.
Did you do this internationally as well?
I did. I did. And in fact, I had an opportunity to address the United Nations because this was so important. As you know, we have natural disasters, we have terrorist threats, and so forth. And so, the UN in various countries are concerned about, okay, so what do we do when there's a disaster? When there's a tsunami, when there's an earthquake, and all our communication systems are down. Can you imagine like all the cellular towers, everything just shuts down because they're collapsed into the earth. And so what do you do? And so now this is no longer becomes a US issue. This is an international issue. And, being able to talk about how the solution is really, it's not necessarily specific to a country. This is a worldwide type of solution that we can offer.
What was that like addressing the United Nations, especially as a Black woman talking about how to solve an international problem with communications?
Well, it was very interesting because, for one, I've never done it before. And two, being in a room with people from all over the world with the same issue, and they're all listening to me. This brown girl from Detroit, they're listening to me. And I'm giving them my experience, the solutions that my team have created. And, it was just amazing because they have faith. My companies that I work for were very reputable, and they knew that they weren't going to just send anybody to just make that statement or command that type of audience. And so the fact that they've asked me to be that person and to speak on behalf of the company to the world about something that, for me, I'll be honest with you, it's easy for me because I'm passionate about it. It's like when you know something works, it's easy to sell it, so to speak. And I'm not a salesperson, but it's easy to talk about how good things are when you truly believe in it. And that's what you get from me in this space because I believe in what we offer. I believe in my teams that produce and develop. And I have some of the best and the brightest around me to make those things a reality, especially when you're talking about public safety. And you always think about first responders, police, fire, and et cetera. But there's a lot of people behind them who are making sure that they are staying protected and that they are getting the right solution so that they can protect the community and ultimately the world.
Did you travel to some of these international locations?
I've spent some time in Beijing, and that was interesting because it was my first trip to China, and I went by myself and had really didn't know anything about the culture, the land, like as far as the streets and like where to go, how to get a cab or whatever. So it was a truly an interesting experience to be by myself for the first time to do it, but I did it. And it was the most it was most I want to say it was a rewarding experience because I had to kind of figure it out on my own, but at the end of the day, I walked away with a good, business arrangement with the Beijing team. Stockholm, at least a couple of times a year I would travel to Stockholm, and actually really it was outside of Stockholm in Kista, and that was just amazing. So not just to see the technologists, the worldwide technologists, we're talking about the best and the brightest in communications around the world. So you think about the cellular devices that you use as an example and working with the best and the brightest around the world that bring that to the everyday consumer. I met those people. I'm in conference rooms with them. I'm in conferences with them. I am making multi-million dollar deals with them to bring these solutions to bear. And then just to learn the culture. Like in Stockholm, one of our partners took us to the Telecommunications Museum, where I learned that they were actually way ahead of the United States in terms of the telephone. And when I looked at it, I said, well, wait a minute. I thought so and so and so, Alexander Graham Bell, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's for the United States. But over here, we had this gentleman, and he did that several years before. And I'm like, wow, it's imperative that if you really want to understand culture, because this is a global world, this is a global economy. As you can see, even with the pandemic, this is a global issue. And really to understand and appreciate what's going on and how we can collectively work together, you have to understand the culture. You have to understand the people. There's so much that goes on that I just did not know until I actually got out there and learned for myself. And it was something a textbook could not teach me.
Tell me some of the other names of countries that you visited.
Oh, I've visited Mexico, and it wasn't like the fun Cancun or, Playa de Carmen and all these other cool places that people go to. I went to, true Mexico, a village where I actually had to stay in Arizona and fly to Mexico to do work in Hermosillo every day because they did not trust me being over there overnight. Although they had a wonderful manufacturing operation, they were doing wonderful work for us. And I was there to basically evaluate their work product. I've been to Germany. I've been to Spain. I've actually presented in Spain, in Barcelona, at a major world conference where you have a gathering of telecommunication experts that congregate every year in Barcelona. I've been to Paris for conferences and spoken there.
Did you go back to school to learn management?
I did go back to George Washington University and was in a master's program for project management. And in there, I learned about the importance of getting the requirements right, making sure that you keep the scope in tech. And because you're in a communications, my experience and background is communication. So as you know, cell phones evolve and technology evolves. You cannot wait. So you have to make sure that you're meeting your time to market. And then, of course, managing a P&L, a profit and loss, as a leader of an organization, you have to make sure that you're keeping your costs down and that your business cases will close so that you are making profit.
Have you found that it has been a challenge being a woman executive or a Black woman executive? How has that worked out?
Yes, and yes. First of all, it was hard to get there. Um, you, when I went in, I always thought that if you did a good job, you got good reviews, met your goals, that you would get promoted. And yes, the first couple of years in your early entry level kind of positions, that's how it works. But I'll never forget, I had a boss who was a director at the time who told me, Michelle, you have this job because you know how to do the work. And so we know that. But to get to the next level, it's about who likes you. And at first I was a little offended because I was like, I'm not here to make friends and be in a popularity contest. I just want to show you how good I am, from a technology perspective or a business perspective. And I know that I'm one of the best of the best. You've given me these awards and you've given me all these things. And so I think you agree, but it's not about that. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. So, well, how is this fair then? And to be honest with you, that is the reality. That was the realest thing somebody could have ever told me. And now as a director and so forth, I honestly try to be fair, about, I look at people's qualities of their work. But it was very difficult for me because it's about how personable are you? How much of a team player are you? How can we all get along and work? And you have to understand that there's people who don't want to work with you solely on the fact that because you're an African American or that you're a woman, and they automatically think, well, she probably doesn't know what she's doing, or she got here on some affirmative action deal or something, or she surely couldn't be as good as they say she is. I've been in conference rooms where I was the only person that looked like me, and they would ask me, so are we having coffee in this meeting? And I said, well, I don't know. We can ask the admin and
So,
find out.
were they trying to imply that you should go fetch the coffee?
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm the one probably leading the meeting or presenting in that meeting. So unfortunately, I got used to it. You get thick skin about it. Really started in undergraduate studies when one of my professors had told me in an office hour that, why are you doing this? Why are you doing engineering? Well, this really isn't a field for women. And I'm going to tell you, that put the fire under me. And I'll never forget, I had him early on in one of my, early entry level engineering courses, and he said that to me. And it sparked a fire under me that I was determined that I was going to be an engineer come hell or high water. And so when I graduated, my last exam was with the same professor. He was teaching a 400 level course. And I walked up to him and I sat my paper down in front of him and I said, I did it. He's like, oh, you're done? I was like, yes, but I did it. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you told me I shouldn't do this, but I did it. You shouldn't do what? I said, you said I shouldn't be an engineer. I shouldn't study engineering, but I'm here and I'm graduating. He's like, oh, I never said that. But I'll tell you what, I never forgot that. He probably said it a dozen times to people. and it kind of is just an off the cuff conversation. And sometimes that can cripple somebody. But for me, it catapulted me and it made me more determined that, oh no, oh, I just got a challenge. He just challenged me. So I'm going to show him and the world that I can do this. And I'm going to be one of the best in doing it. As you know, National Society of Black Engineers, NSBE, is an organization that many universities have for African American engineers. And what a great support group they were in encouraging me to keep pressing forward. And, I've received awards from NSBE as well as part of my engineering career. But having friends that were black, white, Asian, other supporting you, that you really can't do it by yourself. I mean, I know you technically probably have the wherewithal and all of that to do it, but it's a team effort, and that team effort and working as a team, and the team doesn't always have to look like you to make it successful. You just have to have people that are supportive, that are part of that team. And, I had some of the best study partners that helped me get through college. And then I had some of the best mentors and work partners that didn't necessarily look like me. Like I told you about the pilot mentoring program that they started. He was a Caucasian man that was in his 50s, and I was a 20-something-year-old, fresh, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed engineer coming out of undergrad. But he embraced me and he showed me the world, and he exposed me to a place that I didn't even know that I could even go to. I didn't even know about like product management where I ended up going, because they don't teach you that in undergrad. It was all about just pure engineering, and you learn power electronics, and you learn circuitry, and that's it. And then you go out into the real world and you're like, what? You just don't know. And so I have to, tip my hat on the concept of mentorship and also sponsorship, which is a difference. A lot of people don't realize that you can have mentors that help coach and guide you on and navigate through a corporation, but you need a sponsor. So you asked me the question about how did I get to the executive level? You get that through sponsorship. That is somebody who vouches and endorses you. And that person is typically somebody at a high executive level that believes in you, and that basically parades you around the who's who and make sure that you're in the know, that you're sitting at the table at those important meetings, that you're at the helm of some of the major projects. And I had that. And just to let you know, yes, some of the people looked like me, but some of them did not.
Tell me about some of the awards and recognition you received for your work.
Once, I guess, I started getting the awards within the corporation, then my name became more popular in the industry, and then I start getting some more nationally and locally recognized type of awards like outside of the corporation. So like within the corporation, we get things like Product Manager of the Year, being the first actually to receive it. It was a new award that they had constructed, and it was by our senior vice president who put that program on. Outside of the company, things like, so I spent majority of my career in the Chicago area. And so I became recognized as like one of the top 25 women of Chicago. The Who's Who in Black Chicago was another big one. And then the National Award for Black Engineer of the Year award through BEA. That was in It was actually, the award ceremony was in Philadelphia, and that was for a modern day technology leader. And they flew my entire family in and paid for everything.
Okay, in your free time, I don't know if you have any, what do you enjoy doing?
Well, these days in my free time, so I've always enjoyed the research of genealogy and my family history. Been doing that for almost, I want to say now, probably 30 years, close to 30 years now. And I probably have over 3,000 people in my family tree that have been positively identified, not just some names that you throw on a tree, but I've done extensive research and verified through documentation and so forth to establish a pretty solid tree.
Your interest in genealogy, how did that come about?
So I think it really started with my grandmother, Beulah Seabrook. She's my maternal grandmother. She would talk about her life in Macon, Georgia. And I had never been as a kid, and I had heard stories about Georgia and the life in Georgia and how we hailed from the Hart family of Georgia, which was a very prestigious family in central Georgia. And I wanted to know more. And I had this visual in my head of what Macon looked like. And I had it more like Mayberry with dirt roads and just a general store and all of this. And it might have been like that back in the day, at least the way my grandmother was kind of describing kind of growing up there. But I always had this curiosity about, well, tell me more. So she would sit down and just talk about how her and her sister grew up in Georgia and then how she made the move to Detroit and whatnot. And it just was fascinating to me. And I said, oh, I want to learn more. So I actually started my research on my maternal side. And then I realized I have this whole other side I haven't really touched on. That's my paternal side. And so I started working on that. And next thing you know, it's like this master puzzle that you're working on, and you've got roadblocks and you've got pieces that don't quite fit well, and you're getting oral history, and then you're trying to back it with documentation, and then it just became very, very exciting to me. And I understand that it takes a special person to develop an interest in genealogy. And I think I just got the bug and I just moved on from there and just have been doing it and have been deemed now as the family historian. So when anybody has a project or they have a question about someone in the family, say, oh, just call Michelle. She's probably got it in her database.
In your research, how did you find out that you descend from a patriot of the American Revolution?
So I actually had a cousin that was already in the DAR, and I had taken, she was into and she still is into genealogy. She's more she's I would say maybe in her 80s now. So she was older than me, and she had done a lot of research already on the family. And she was just telling me, hey, Michelle, you need to just come to Macon. They've never had a fire, they've never had a flood. And so all of the original records from the beginning of time are here. And you can learn so much about the family. We have such a rich history, and oh, by the way, I'm in the DAR, and you should probably consider joining. And I was like, okay. So I flew down to Georgia, and I could not sleep. I'm gonna tell you, I could not sleep because I was so excited. I learned so much about my family. I spent time in the genealogy archives in Macon, Georgia. And I came in and I said simply, I am doing genealogy research on the Hart family. Can you show me where I can find some information on them? She said, 1 second. The young lady walked in the back into some room, and she came out with this book. And this book had to be like 2 feet wide, about 6 inches thick. And she said, this is a lot of information on the Hart family. Plus, you can look on the microfilm and some other things, but this is where you want to get started. I opened this book, and there's just pages and pages of information about the Hart family. And I'm like, how am I going to read all of this? I'm only here for a few days, but I got to have all of this information. I need to know about my family. So I made a bunch of photocopies, but there was a letter in the book, and it was a letter from one of the descendants of one of the Hart descendants, and she says, if you want to know more information about the family, you can email me at such and such and such at AOL.com. And I'm like, oh, AOL. Who's using AOL? This must be really old, you know? So I was taking a gamble to think that, okay, is this person's account still valid? And next thing you know, she plugged me into a lot of information, and the rest is history, as they say. I just took off from there, and I literally I would go back to my hotel after making all these photocopies and just sit on the bed with all these papers sprawled out on the bed and just reading. And I remember it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I looked over at the phone and I said, I should call my grandma. I need to call my grandma. Did she know? I wonder if she knew this. And my grandma's the type of person that you could call her any time of night, day, whatever, and she will talk to you. So I did. I was so like amped up from just what I was reading, and I forget specifically what it was that just blew my mind, but I picked up the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning and I said, Grandma, did you know that such and such and such a, yeah, baby. Yeah, I remember that. Like, you never told me about this. But then you realize there's so much that they grew up in and took for granted, just as, yeah, that was just my life, right? And that's just what we did, and that's just how things were. But to me, as being several generations later and looking back on this, like, oh my goodness. I would tell you what, Risha, I ended up spending about 4 months putting together a whole PowerPoint presentation, and I delivered it to the family in Detroit. And I was living in Chicago at the time, so I flew into Detroit because I had to tell them about this family, this incredible family. And I spent 2 hours. I had booked one of the buffet or banquet rooms in the hotel. I ordered food, and
Was this a reunion, or did you schedule this and say everyone needs to come?
that's exactly what it was. It was just, I need you to come. It was not a reunion. And about 100 people showed up, believe it or
Wow,
not.
100. Did they travel in from other cities?
Some did. Some did. Some came from Connecticut. Some of them came from Georgia.
So it was
Um,
like an impromptu
it
reunion
was, but it was
because
just
they
like,
came.
yeah, it was just like, if you can come, come. And because I was just, you just don't understand. I was so overwhelmed with what I had discovered, and I just felt like I had to share it with somebody. And I was so afraid that if I passed away at a young age and I didn't get a chance to share this with somebody, this is going to be tragic. So I got to tell you some stuff about this family.
Join us for the next episode for the continuation of this story to hear what Michelle learned about her family and Michelle's experience as a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, including her grandmother joining the organization at 99 years old.